For years, South Africa's economy has felt, well, stuck, kind of trapped in this low growth cycle. But what if I told you a really fundamental shift is happening right now, quietly, under the surface? Today, we're going to unpack the big structural changes that are starting to completely rewrite that story. For the better part of a decade, the narrative was just stagnation, an economy that just couldn't seem to find its gear. But something has genuinely changed, which brings us to this huge question. Is the slump actually finally over? Let's take a look at the data. The contrast here is pretty stark, right? On the left, you've got the painful reality of the last decade, an average growth of just 0.27%. But look to the right. That's the new story. 4 straight quarters of economic expansion. This isn't just a random blip. It's a sign of real momentum building up.
So what's really driving this? It's not a temporary commodity boom or some other lucky break. No, this turnaround is built on something way more solid. Deep structural reform. The whole recovery really rests on 2 massive interconnected pillars. First, you've got to stabilize the nation's energy supply. And second, you have to get the country's financial house in order.
So on one hand, the government finally got serious about tackling the crippling energy crisis. We're talking rigorous maintenance and a smart strategy to unbundle the state power utility, basically breaking it up into smaller, more focused pieces. And on the other hand, they brought in some serious fiscal discipline to stop that endless cycle of borrowing. And the results on the energy front? Well, they've been nothing short of dramatic. By late 2025, grid reliability hit 98%. Think about that. There were only 4 days of load shedding in the entire previous year. That kind of stability is the absolute bedrock for new economic confidence. Okay, now on the financial side, the government achieved something called a primary budget surplus. I know, it sounds super technical, but the real-world impact is huge. It means that for the first time since 2008, the country isn't borrowing money just to pay for its day-to-day operations. So why is that surplus such a big deal? Because the interest payments on the national debt are just staggering. We're talking 1.2 billion rand every single day. Just let that sink in for a minute. That's more than the budgets for education, healthcare, and policing combined, just going to interest payments. So achieving that primary surplus is the crucial first step to finally start chipping away at that crippling cost and maybe, just maybe, start putting that money where it's desperately needed. All right, so with that foundation finally looking stable, some new engines are really starting to power the economy forward. Let's talk about green tech and trade across the continent. Building on that new energy stability, the green economy has become a massive magnet for investment. The Green Hydrogen National Program, all by itself, has pulled in projects worth a whopping $800 billion. That signals a major new industrial direction for the country. And this chart here, this really highlights South Africa's industrial leadership in Africa. Over 61% of what it sells to the rest of the continent are manufactured goods. This gives it a huge advantage with the new African Continental Free Trade Area, putting it into prime position to be a key industrial and logistics hub. And of course, this kind of economic progress gets you noticed on the world stage. Successfully hosting the G20 summit in 2025 really helped re-anchor the country's reputation, boosting its role as a key leader within the global south. But, and this is a really big but, while the national balance sheet is looking a lot healthier, the daily reality for so many people is still incredibly tough. There are some deep-rooted challenges here that aren't just going to disappear overnight. Yeah, the human cost of that last decade is still painfully obvious right here. The headline unemployment rate is already sky-high at 33.2%. But look at the youth unemployment figure, an absolutely staggering 62.2%. This tells you exactly where the economic pain is hitting the hardest. And this isn't just some abstract number on a spreadsheet. Over the past decade, real GDP per capita, what the average person earns, actually fell by a cumulative 4.2%. That number represents a very real, very harsh decline in living standards for millions of people. And there are still some major physical roadblocks that could derail this whole recovery. You've got ongoing water and security issues, for sure. But there's also a critical gap in the electricity transmission grid. All those new green energy projects need a way to connect to the country, and that new grid capacity isn't expected to be ready until after 2027. That's a serious potential bottleneck for growth. So, all of this brings us to the real heart of the issue, the core tension facing the country right now. It's the massive gap that still exists between coming up with good policy and actually getting it done on the ground. The potential here is just enormous. Think about this number. Our 1.8 trillion. That's how much cash South African companies are sitting on, just waiting on the sidelines. It's capital that's ready to be invested, but it's waiting for a clear, sustained signal that this recovery is the real deal. So here's the bottom line. The policies seem to be right. The financial path is clear. The private sector has the money ready to go. Success or failure now comes down to one single crucial word: implementation. And that leaves us with the final, pivotal question for 2026. It's not about whether the plan is correct anymore. It's about whether the state actually has the capacity to execute it, to turn these hard-won gains on paper into the real-world jobs and widespread growth the country so desperately needs. The path forward is clear, but the will to actually walk it is what will determine everything.